Welcome back to the deep dive. We have a fascinating, and I have to say, a slightly terrifying stack of documents today.
Uh-huh.
We're looking at a big analysis of the Ukrainian energy sector, but reading it felt, I don't know, less like policy review and more like a script for a really high-stakes heist movie.
It does have that criminal drama feel, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Except the target isn't a bank vault.
No.
It's the entire national infrastructure.
Right. And before we get into all the details, because some of this gets pretty dense, financially speaking,
It does.
I want to start with a picture. The source material we're looking at, from a Dr. Viacheslav Morgun, it opens with this really powerful analogy. He calls it the stolen house.
It's a great way to frame it.
So imagine this. You build a house with your own two hands. You paid for the bricks, you mixed the cement, your parents helped you lay the foundation.
A multi-generational project.
Exactly. You own it. But then, just as the paint dries, some slick guys in suits show up with a bunch of corrupt notaries. And they don't kick you out. That'd cause a riot. Instead, they just re-register the house to themselves for almost nothing.
And the really clever part is, they let you stay.
They let you stay in the house you built, but now you have to pay them rent. And they control the thermostat, the water, everything. And when the roof starts to leak because they haven't spent a single hryvnia on maintenance...
They demand you pay for the repairs.
Yes. They call it an investment surcharge. But they don't fix the roof. They take your money and they go buy a yacht. And you pay it because what's the alternative? Freezing on the street.
That really does set the stage perfectly.
Yeah.
What Dr. Morgan is arguing is that this isn't hypothetical.
No.
This is, in his view, the history of the Ukrainian energy sector. The house is the grid, built by the public, and the landlords are the oligarchic groups currently running it.
And we should be clear about who we're talking about here. Dr. Viacheslav Morgun, he isn't just some blogger. He's a PhD in law specializing in municipal law and economics.
Right, so he's looking at this from a very specific legal and ownership framework.
His article, Energy Reform, From Oligarchs to Territorial Communities, it's trying to do a few things. First, just tear down the idea that Ukraine even has a real energy market.
Second, to show how money is being siphoned off, especially now during the war. And third, to propose this radical solution. That acronym we'll have to tackle later, the IJAR model.
Oh, that acronym is a beast. We will get there. But let's start with his first big claim, because you always hear about the European energy market, competition. It sounds so modern.
It sounds good on paper, but Morgan says it's basically smoke and mirrors. He calls it a hybrid administrative command system.
Which is a polite way of saying.
It's a rigged game. I mean, a real market needs competition to drive prices down. But in Ukrainian energy, you have an oligopoly. 5, maybe 6 major players control everything. So the whole price mechanism works backward.
Okay, this brings us to what he calls the golden share concept. I honestly had to read this part twice. It seems completely upside down.
It is. It's very counterintuitive.
Yeah.
So in the energy mix, you have different sources, right? You have cheap, steady nuclear power from Energoatom. Then you have thermal power plants, the TES, that burn coal or gas.
Which are expensive, but you can turn them on and off quickly.
Exactly. For peak demand, like when everyone gets home from work and turns on their lights.
Okay, so if you have cheap nuclear and expensive coal, the final price should be some kind of average, right?
That would be the logical way. But that's not how this marginal pricing model works. Dr. Morgan explains that the price for the entire market is often set by the most expensive unit needed to balance the grid at that moment.
Wait, hold on. So because one expensive coal plant has to turn on for an hour at 6 p.m.?
The cheap nuclear plant gets paid that same high price for the energy it was producing all day anyway.
So the expensive coal drags the price of the cheap nuclear up.
It pulls the whole market price up.
Right.
That's what he means by the golden share. The owners of those thermal plants, who are mostly private, they effectively set the price ceiling for the whole country.
That's wild. It's like buying a Toyota, but because the dealership sold one Ferrari that day, you have to pay the Ferrari price.
That's a very good analogy for how it hits the consumer. But it gets even deeper. We have to talk about the wires themselves, the infrastructure. This is where RAB tariffs come in.
Regulatory asset base. This sounded like some kind of accounting black magic.
It's pretty close. So when the distribution networks were privatized, a lot of old Soviet-era infrastructure was sold pretty cheap. The new owners didn't build it. But then they lobbied to have these assets revalued.
So they just artificially jacked up the price tag on stuff they already owned.
Exactly. And the RAB tariff lets them charge a percentage of that inflated value as a guaranteed return on investment. It's baked right into your utility bill.
Let me get this straight. I'm paying a fee to the utility company to give them a return on the value of pipes that my tax money probably built 50 years ago.
You got it. Dr. Morgan says in some cases, the owners get more back in these RIB tariff profits in a single year than they paid for the whole company in the first place.
It's just a rent-seeking machine.
That's his argument.
Yeah.
And the whole idea that unbundling, splitting generation from supply would fix this, he says that just made it worse. He calls it the unbundling trap.
How so?
Because in an oligopoly, it just creates more links in the chain for markups. Generation sells to a trader, who sells to an operator, who sells to a supplier.
And every one of those links adds their cut.
That's the concept of double marginalization.
Yeah.
He uses DTEK as an example. They mine the coal, they burn it, they distribute the power, and then they sell it through a brand like Yasno. Legally different companies, maybe, but the money all flows to the same place, and you pay a markup at every single step.
Okay, so that's how the stolen house operates in peacetime. But the really disturbing part of this analysis is what's happening now during the war.
Right. You'd think a full-scale invasion would change the dynamic.
It has. But Dr. Morgan argues it's changed in favor of the monopolists. He uses this phrase, privatization of profits, nationalization of losses.
When things are good, the cash goes offshore. When the missiles hit, the taxpayer picks up the tab.
He talks about this very specific mechanism with international aid that is, frankly, infuriating.
The transformers and generators.
Yeah, we see the headlines, U.S. sends 50 transformers.
So here's the trick, according to the text. If that equipment comes as a grant, for you it's free. It's often just transferred onto the balance sheet of the private energy company.
So a private company just gets $1 million piece of equipment for free.
Yep. It increases their company's value. They own it. But it gets worse. If the aid is a credit, a loan, the state of Ukraine takes on the debt.
So the private company gets the equipment to keep their business running, but the Ukrainian people are on the hook to pay back the loan.
That's the accusation. And while this is happening, Morgan points out that these big energy holdings are not reinvesting their own profits back into Ukraine's grid. He cites billions being invested in steel plants in Italy and Romania.
So we're begging the world for aid to fix our grid, while the people who own the grid are taking their profits and buying factories in the EU.
It creates a massive moral hazard, and that's before you even get to the direct corruption, like the Mindachgate scandal.
That was about the concrete shelters for the substations, right?
Billions were allocated to build these huge concrete bunkers to protect transformers from missile strikes. The claim is a lot of that money was just stolen, or it resulted in Potemkin villages.
Just sandbags instead of reinforced concrete.
Pretty much. And the result wasn't just financial loss. The result was that when the strikes came, the equipment was exposed and people sat in the dark.
There's another one in here that I found almost hard to believe. The cryptocurrency hole.
Oh yeah, this one sounds like science fiction.
Break this down. How does this even work?
Okay, so crypto mining uses a massive amount of electricity. The text alleges that insiders set up these huge mining farms, but they didn't pay for the power.
How do you hide that kind of consumption?
You write it off as technical losses. Every grid loses some power in transmission. It's normal. They allegedly just inflated those numbers to cover up the electricity being diverted to the mining farms.
And who pays for technical losses?
You do. It's built into your tariff. So you had grandmothers paying higher rates, effectively subsidizing an illegal Bitcoin mine, all while they were facing blackouts because the grid was supposedly overloaded.
It's just so brazen. And Dr. Morgan argues this isn't just a series of accidents, it's structural. He even compares it to a failed Soviet reform from 1965.
The Kosygin-Lieberman reform, it's about the why. Why is the system so inefficient?
The cost-plus trap.
Exactly. Back then, they tried to boost production by tying factory director bonuses to the value of their output. So directors quickly realized, if I use more expensive materials, my product's value goes up, and so does my bonus.
So there's no incentive to be efficient. In fact, you're rewarded for being wasteful.
And Morgan says the Ukrainian tariff system today does the same thing. The regulator approves tariffs based on a company's costs. If you inflate your costs, expensive repairs, revalued assets, you can justify a higher tariff. Efficiency actually gets punished.
So a fake market, a war being used to socialize debt, and a pricing model that encourages waste.
Yeah.
It's a bleak picture. But he does propose a solution. And now we have to tackle that alphabet soup.
Single legal entity of public law economic subject.
Let's just call it the public law model. What's the core idea? Because when you say nationalize, people get nervous about state-run companies being just as bad.
And that's a crucial distinction he makes. This isn't about creating another clunky state enterprise. It's about changing the nature of ownership, giving the infrastructure back to the territorial community, the Hromada.
Okay, so the city owns its own grid. How does that fix anything?
He uses the borscht principle. It's the best analogy in the whole text.
The borscht principle. I'm listening.
If you're cooking borscht in your kitchen for your family, you peel the potatoes, you chop the beets. Do you charge your wife VAT when you hand her the cabbage?
No.
Do you run a tender to see if your son is the cheapest option to stir the pot?
Of course not. It's all in-house.
Exactly. A community is one economic organism. If the city's water company, heat company, and power company are all just departments of a municipality, they stop suing each other. They stop paying VAT on transactions between themselves. You consolidate it all.
So you just strip out all the internal profit margins and taxes.
The goal is to provide the service at prime cost.
Okay, but is that even legal under EU rules? I thought you had to have open markets and competition.
This is where he plays his ace. He cites a ruling from the EU Court of Justice, the Altmark case.
The Altmark case.
Yeah. It established this concept of SEG services of general economic interest. European law basically says some things, like water and heat, aren't normal commercial goods. The Altmark rules allow a municipality to provide these services directly at cost plus a reasonable investment buffer without a commercial profit margin.
So he's saying this model is actually fully compatible with European law?
He's saying it's arguably more European than the fake oligarchic market we have now.
Okay, I get the theory, but I have to be the skeptic here. You hand the entire grid over to the local city council. Doesn't this just move the corruption from the oligarch to the local mayor?
That is the #1 fear, of course. Great. Now the local deputy is stealing the copper wire. But the model has a very specific control mechanism built in, the OSM.
Bodies of self-organization, like street committees, neighborhood associations.
Yes. And in this model, they have real power, signing power. So let's say the municipal utility claims they repaired your substation for 100,000 hryvnias.
Okay.
They don't get that money from the budget until the representative of your street's OSN signs the Completion Act, verifying the work was actually done.
Wait, really? Can a neighborhood committee actually manage that? I mean, are they qualified to sign off on high voltage repair?
They're not signing off on the engineering specs. They're signing off on the fact of the service. Did the lights come back on? Did the crew even show up? It moves accountability from some ministry in Kyiv to the people who actually live there.
I see. It's a check against that Potemkin village problem.
Exactly. And then financially, he proposes a separate risk fund so that energy debts don't end up eating the school and hospital budgets.
And he claims investors would actually like this, which sounds counterintuitive.
Because an industrial investor building a factory, they just want certainty. They want to plug in and have power at a stable price. They don't want to have to pay bribes or wait 2 years for a connection. This model, he argues, offers that plug-and-play transparency.
So let's just zoom out. We started with the stolen house. The public built an asset, lost it, and is now paying rent to live in their own home.
And we've seen how that rent is collected through the golden share, RAB tariffs, and even the theft of wartime aid. It's a system that funnels well upwards.
And Dr. Morgan's solution, this public law model, is basically a hard reset. It says, stop pretending this is a market.
Acknowledge it's a life support system, bring it in-house, strip out the profit motive, and use local control to keep it honest.
Yeah.
It really challenges the whole orthodoxy of the last 30 years.
It does. We've always been told private is efficient, public is wasteful. Morgan just looks at the reality on the ground and asks, is this efficient? And I want to leave our listeners with this final thought. We tend to think of electricity as a commodity, like a smartphone. If you can't afford the new iPhone, well, you live without it.
But you can't live without heat in the Ukrainian winter. You can't run a hospital without power.
Exactly. So if energy isn't just a commodity, if it's a human right, and right now a matter of national survival, does it make any sense for the off switch to be in private hands?
And that's the multi-billion-dollar question that Dr. Morgan leaves us with.
A huge thank you to Dr. Viacheslav Morgun for this analysis. It's a heavy read, but a really important one. And thank you all for listening to this deep dive. We'll see you next time.